I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Janet, could you proceed with roll call?
Commissioner Gupta,
Here.
Commissioner Ketchum,
Here.
Commissioner Santa Cruz,
Here.
Commissioner Ramirez,
Here.
Chairman Hansen,
Here.
and staff is represented by Monowitz and Fox.
At the beginning of all planning commissions, we have a period of open communication for items that are not on the agenda. If anybody wishes to speak to the planning commission for anything of their concern to the planning commission about things not on the agenda, this is the time to do that. Has anybody signed up? Anybody in the audience? Not seeing any, I'll close that session. Our next step is usually consideration of the minutes that we're going to postpone until our next meeting. We have 2 items on the consent calendar. Does anybody wish to pull off the items?
I move to approve.
Okay.
I second.
We have a motion. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Passes unanimously, 5-0. We'll go to the next item on the irregular agenda. Janet, could you read that in for us, please?
Can I get a minute? Hold just a second.
No problem.
We have item 3, owner Leonid Bagelman, applicant Stuart Welty, file number PLN 2019-00171, location 222 Portola State Park Road.
Good morning, Commissioners. My name is Kelsey Lang, and I'll be presenting the Resource Management Permit and Grading Permit for you. So this project is to construct a 3,123 square foot single-story, single-family residence with an attached garage, as well as a detached 973 square foot greenhouse library structure, which is 3 stories, but due to the grading has a total height of 29 feet. The project also includes the installation of a septic system, regrading of the driveway, and creating a fire truck turnaround, as well as a water storage tank. That work requires 2,825 cubic yards of grading and the removal of 7 trees, 3 of which are already considered to be dead. Here we have the overview of the site with the county layers added. So the site is outlined in green and it's within the RM zone. You can see Portola State Park Road to the right of the screen, and the peach hashing is the County Scenic Corridor, which is why this project is in front of you today. You'll notice to the left end of the property, Evans Creek runs through the property, and then abuts Pescadero Creek County Park. If we remove the county layers, we can see the site a little bit more clearly. And we're going to focus on this area of the site where the development is focused. So if we zoom in there, you can see the Portola State Park Road again on the right. There is an existing house on the property, and that is where the new house is proposed. So you can see the new house will be where the blue box is, and then the proposed library greenhouse structure would be where the orange box is. If we switch to a plan view, this is the proposed house and library structure. Again, the house is surrounded by the blue box and the library structure by the orange box. These are some renderings provided by the architect. You could see the house towards the front of these pictures, and then the library tower towards the upper right-hand corner. These are some photos of the existing site, so we'll run through them left to right, top to bottom. So this one is the existing driveway viewed from Portola State Park Road. the driveway up near the house, the area where the new fire truck turnaround is proposed in between some existing trees, the existing house on the property, which is where the new house is proposed to be located, the view of the property as if you were standing at the existing house looking out, and then as if you were looking towards where the library tower is going to be is roughly where that person is standing. In the general plan, this property is designated as open space rural. It complies with a number of policies in the general plan. I've highlighted a few here, which are the most important ones for this consideration, and the proposal does conform to these policies. In the zoning, this property is zoned resource management. It conforms to all the development standards of the resource management zone and the zoning regulations in general. I've highlighted some of the development standards here, and as you can see, the proposal exceeds them by quite a bit on all fronts. The grading that's required for this is 2,825 cubic yards. Most of it is cut with a little bit of fill. That's to regrade the driveway, to create that fire truck turnaround for the structures, and then to use some of that fill to flatten out the meadow area. 7 trees are proposed to be removed. 3 of those trees are considered to be already dead. The 4 living trees are being removed because they interfere with where the structures are to be placed or the utility lines. This project did have an initial study done and a mitigated negative declaration, which was for public review in December, and no comments were received about these documents. So there's a number of findings that you can find in the report, but I've highlighted 3 here which deal with the mitigated negative declaration, the zoning regulations, and the grading ordinance. And with those findings, staff is recommending approving the project as per the conditions in attachment A.
Thank you. Does the commission have any questions for staff? Please.
So in the high fire hazard severity zone, does the county allow wood siding still in this area?
I don't know the answer to that off the top of my head. I know all siding needs to meet certain fire resistant requirements. Whether or not there's wood siding that meets that requirement, I don't know off the top of my head.
So this appears to have wood siding.
The project has been reviewed by CAL FIRE, and they included conditions of approval, which include different fire ratings for the materials.
I see.
The building department has also stated that as well.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
From the other remaining 4 trees that are going to be removed, do you know the type of trees? Are there going to be like a protected species trees? Or?
3 of them are fir trees, and 1 is a multi-stem bay, and they will be required to replace these trees, which they've included in their landscape plans.
So the one that are going to be removed, the 4 that are going to be removed, what kind of tree are they?
3 of them are fir trees, and then 1 of them is a bay tree.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
So because the other 3 trees are dead, they don't need to be replaced? Is that how it goes?
Correct. You can remove a dead tree without requiring
Without
replacement.
requiring to do that? And I think I read that it says with 15-gallon minimum 15-gallon size tree. Okay. One other question that I had is about the creeks. How far are the creeks from where this construction will take place? And has there been any flooding in the past of those creeks?
Yeah. Evans Creek is approximately 760 feet from the proposed development. The property is quite steeply sloped, with the creek at the bottom and the proposed development at the top.
Okay.
So the proposed development wouldn't be affected by any flooding.
Okay. But has there been any history of flooding in those creeks that we know of?
Not that I'm aware of. Perhaps the applicant could speak to that.
Okay. And how far are any neighboring homes from this property? It seems like a pretty sizable property.
Yeah, the property is almost 38 acres. If I could get the first slide, the aerial view. Keep going. One more. Yeah, so the closest house is towards the top of the property. That's the closest neighbor. It's towards the top of the screen.
Okay. So neighbors are not concerned in any way,
I have not heard anything from
anything
neighbors.
from them. Okay. Thank you.
Regarding the condition of approval of a drainage section, is there any system set up for follow-up and compliance?
So the applicants have submitted a building permit, which will be also reviewed by the drainage section, and they'll set up their conditions to make sure they're complied with.
Because I see in the report that says that it's being pre-approved, but with the a conditional approval for a follow-up, and I want to make sure if there is a way of like when they discuss, because we need to approve this first, so we need to make sure that there is a way of follow-up and compliance when this is pre-approved. It's not totally approved.
Yes, so when the building permit comes in, which it has, it will be reviewed by drainage as well to make sure that all the pre-approvals were complied with in the building permit.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Does the applicant wish to make a presentation at this time?
Good morning, Commissioners, or Board of Supervisors. Commissioners, sorry. My name is Stuart Welty. I'm the Principal Architect at EID Architects. And we had prepared a small PowerPoint presentation, but Kelsey's, it's sort of redundant. I mean, I don't know if I want to waste your time with it because Kelsey gave such a thorough, concise presentation that she's really gave the same slides that we were going to show. We weren't going to dwell on the details of the architecture and design unless you would like to hear more. But we thought the set's pretty thorough. We focus as a firm on zero energy, net zero energy, sustainable buildings and communities. We're passive certified, LEED accredited, et cetera, and we've been doing this for 30 some years. And we were sort of born to do this because we just want to give the reason we're architects and the reason we go through all this pain is because we are hoping to leave buildings behind that show how buildings can, integrate with the environment and give back to the environment as opposed to constantly taking from it, and also to enhance the living experience for the folks who live there and visit. So that's what we focus on. We have a lot of those kind of qualities built into Leo's project as well. Leo is very sincere about leaving a small footprint and living in a way that is very sustainable. The whole reason for the greenhouse and the tower is because he and his wife are very avid readers and scientists, and they really love to research, and that gives them that solitude and workshop area to pursue things that they feel are very important to, again, the environment. So in addition to that, the only other part of our presentation was really focusing on the idea that currently the existing structure is a two-story structure, and speaking of wood, it's a tinderbox and it's ready to fall down. In addition, the driveway that goes to it is completely out of compliance with any current CAL FIRE or county standards, and so we'll be improving all of that to current standards, of course. And we've been working closely with all the fire protection agencies and all the various county departments. There's several arborists involved, and there's lots of duplication in review. So speaking to the idea of follow up on review and making sure that things are in compliance as the project goes forward, there will be a lot of that. There's geotechnical engineers, there's geologists, there's water use folks, there's lots of people involved in the project. So that's it, really. If you have any further questions, like I say, we're happy to spend more of your time, but we'd rather just create the home and show how a home can actually be net zero.
Lisa.
I just wanted to ask you a question about the metal standing seam roof. It has a pitch of 1.5 inch and 12 inches. And I'm interested in this because we had heard on another project that it's important to have a lot of pitch for that type of roof. So apparently this can be used in a more flat roof.
Yeah. So what manufacturers do? We work closely with manufacturers. Because we really are into what we do and sincere about it, we really research a lot as well. We work with a lot of the tech departments, so we don't just specify materials. We know a lot of the folks at the technical departments of many manufacturers. So a manufacturer will give a blanket warranty and sort of criteria for the use of their product because they want to be very safe. They have a lot of factors involved in their criteria to give them a safety factor. So if we want to go beyond that, we'll talk to their tech department and work out a way. We always have these kind of things documented. So normally, metal roof, most manufacturers will specify 3 and 12 minimum. But because we've worked with some of these technical departments, we have letters from them to allow us to go to any pitch. And because of the way that we create our assemblies, again, we do a lot of R&D on our own. We won a governor's award from Arnold Schwarzenegger, Governor Schwarzenegger, back a few years ago, for a community that we designed down in Watsonville, which was the first actually net zero energy community, 22-acre community of 500 homes, affordable housing, in California. So and the reason we were able to do that is because we work with builders who are willing to help us build these assemblies, test them. We've done extensive testing with energy compliance engineers, et cetera. And so we've had a lot of trial and error, but we've come up with assemblies that really work. And so we show those assemblies then to like a technical department at custom-built metal roofs, for instance, and they'll evaluate it. Sometimes we actually work with ICC in Chicago, International Code Council, and et cetera. So they look at it, and if they like the assemblies, they'll grant us the letters that we need to do the things we want to do. If they don't, they'll make suggestions, and then we'll work back and forth, and we do a lot of that. And so that way we know that our assemblies are actually working. We go in afterwards on our buildings and we test them. We have all the thermal imaging equipment and infrared equipment, et cetera, so you can pinpoint. It's really fun, actually. I mean, it's really cool, these images that you see after, because you can see exactly if there's an energy leak, you can see exactly where it is. But it's always a balance, it's acoustics, it's energy, it's lifestyle, it's ability. Passive house design is all geared on, if you go to CPAW and PHIUS, PHIUS website, and it gives you a really thorough analysis of how it works. But the way our buildings balance the various rooms out, if you feel like opening all the doors and windows one day and have the fresh air and have that completely indoor-outdoor experience, the house will rebalance itself. Sometimes it will just turn itself off because you have everything open. And sometimes you want to close it all down. And whether it's for noise or sound or rain or whatever it might be, wind, and the house will compensate, the buildings will compensate for that. And so that's how we're able to reach net zero.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
No question.
Thank you.
You bet. Thank you very much.
I'd like to open this portion now for public comment. Do we have anybody who wishes to speak?
I don't have any speaker cards. No.
Does anybody in the audience wish to come forward to speak to the commission? Seeing none, unless some objections, I'll close the public portion. Seeing none, we'll move to our discussion. Does anybody?
I'll let me start on that. Overall, I just want to say that I think it's a really good project, good design. Congratulate the architect and the owner. I think it's a modest size house for the lot size, so that's nice to see that you're not trying to build something extremely big, which you could because of the space that you have. So overall, I'm very supportive of this project.
Any other comments?
Yes, yes. I agree. It's a good project. I like it. From the architect mentioning net zero energy housing, I think that's great. I know that I'm sure it's a little extra in terms of cost of construction and design, but I really appreciate that. The other comment that I wanted to make is that I went through the report and it's about using natural earth tone colors. It looks, at least in the renderings, looks very sophisticated there. And one of the other things that caught my eye is that trying to reuse the soil that is used in what you call in the wildflower meadows thing. So I really like that. So I'm very supportive of the project.
Make a motion? Shall I make a motion?
Let me make a comment first. I really liked your design. I thought it very innovative. I love the concept of a library that's elevated. I just thought, boy, I would like to live there. You know, I guess it's a success when anytime you look at somebody's rendering and saying, wow, I'd like to be there. So again, like you mentioned, it's actually smaller than it could be. What isn't maximized out? It is very livable. It is facing over an area. It's one directional, but it made use of the topography, and it's not intrusive and gorgeous. So thank you. And I will be supportive of this. So do we have a motion?
I move that we adopt the initial study and mitigated negative declaration and approve the resource management permit and grading permit, county file number PLN 2019-00171, by making the required findings and adopting the conditions of approval as listed in attachment A.
Second, yeah.
Okay, we have a second. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any nays? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Congratulations. We go to our next item, which is the Bel Air Heights. Janeth, when you have a moment, could you read that in? Thank you.
Thank you. Item number 4, owner applicant, Bel Air Heights, LLC, file number PLN 2002-00517, location Ascension Drive and Bel Air Road.
Good morning, Commissioners. Chair Hanson, Joe LeClaire, Planning Manager of the county. Here to present the, actually it's Ascension Heights. The name hasn't changed yet. The Bel Air Heights LLC is the owner, but there's a process that needs to be gone through if the title of the approved subdivision is going to change. So we're presenting you the Ascension Heights subdivision this morning. And we're basically presenting the response to your comments and the public comments from last fall's September 25th review of the grading plans, schedule, haul routes, and so on. So this just gives you a history of the review of this approved iteration of the subdivision starting back in 2015, and as I mentioned, your review of the grading plans, haul routes, and schedules in September of 2019. So we have a approved subdivision and grading permit approved by the Board of Supervisors. The applicant is seeking its grading hard card, which is the building permit that they need to conduct the grading, and the Board of Supervisors delegated to the Planning Commission the responsibility for reviewing those certain aspects of the grading operations, schedule, haul routes, and that's all laid out in condition 14 of the approved subdivision, and so tentatively they're planning to start, with your approval, the grading activities in May. As I said, the condition 14 asks the Planning Commission to take a look at the schedule of grading events, hauling equipment, haul routes, and dust, debris, and traffic control measures. So just one detailed slide on dust, debris, and traffic control measures. So of course they'll have a stabilized entrance to comply with stormwater measures. All loads will be leaving the site tarped, and dust control will be conducted on a daily basis, on an ongoing basis throughout the day, and the street sweeping will be as needed on a daily basis, and flagmen will manage the site entrance. The applicant will spend a good deal more time going over the actual grading operations as they're planned out, and in part to respond to the comments from Planning Commission and public last time. I'm going to just hit some of the highlights and then turn it over to the applicant so that they can present and be able to answer some of your questions from a technical perspective that I may not be able to. So first of all, one of the big issues from last time was wet weather grading, and the schedule does not include wet weather grading at this point. They're going to start the actual moving dirt on May 4th, pursuant to this schedule. There was concerns expressed about Rainbow Drive, its landslide stability, and narrowness. We consulted with Department of Public Works again yesterday. They, of course, attended last meeting and assured us that although the phase one haul routes do entail use of Rainbow and Lakeshore, that's for 2 months, two months and a little bit for May, June, and a little bit of July. And those trucks will be empty, and so there's not a load issue from the standpoint of running heavy loads over that. But also, Department of Public Works assured us that their monitoring has shown no movement in that landslide over the many years that they've been monitoring it, and that the streets are wide enough to accommodate this traffic. No grading on Spare the Air days came up, and we consulted with the Bay Area Air Quality Management District, and they do not prohibit construction activities on Spare the Air days. Obviously, it's not a regulatory program, it's an encouragement program of theirs, and they do prohibit the burning of wood on those days, wood fires in homes and that sort of thing. But that's the only thing that's prohibited on Spare the Air days. And there was some concern expressed about tree protection being inadequate. We've consulted with the county arborist as well as the project arborist, and although in some instances where trees are planted very close to the property line, meeting ideal tree protection standards is not feasible. The protection that is installed is the maximum feasible, and arborists assure us will protect those trees. One thing that came up at our last meeting was that there were dusky-footed wood rats present on the site. We took that seriously and had the developer hire a biologist to assess the on-site conditions. They found several nests on the site something in the vicinity of like 30 or 40 nests, maybe more. not all of them were active, but they found all this nest material. And so they consulted with California Department of Fish and Wildlife Standards and developed a plan for wood rat relocation to another part of the site that's not subject to this development, and it provided a location for these rats to relocate to. And then one concern was there were no specific dates in the grading plan, and now those have been included. Also concerned about Cal Water project in Pear Drive conflicting with the grading operation, but those two projects will be coordinated and not cause a problem. And finally, there was some question about whether or not the project could grade the new driveway first. I'm going to just say that we believe that it cannot be done first because of the agreements in place and the need to relocate Cal Water infrastructure. And I'll let the applicant explain that to you in greater detail. And some of the comments that we've got in the emails that have come in over the last couple of weeks addressing this include that there was excessive vegetation removal on the site compared to what has been presented in the past. We have been to the site twice to inspect both for tree and vegetation removal and erosion control protection. And there were some shrubs that were removed and one tree that was removed that was not authorized, and it was a protected tree. And so we have required that the developer submit an after-the-fact removal permit, pay the fines, the fees, and plant 2 15-gallon oak trees to replace for the, we suspect it was about an 18-inch oak that was taken down. All we could see was the stump, so we couldn't be sure what the exact size at breast height was. It's possible it was less than 18, but I think it was a protected tree. And then I've already mentioned the protections that'll be in place for dust and traffic management. So with that, before we make our recommendation, I'd like to turn it over to the applicant to let them walk you through in greater detail the grading process to respond to some of the concerns that have been raised. So, Janet, if you could pull up their presentation, I'd appreciate it very much.
Joe, before you leave,
Yes.
let me just ask if the commission wants to ask you any specific questions.
Absolutely, and I'll be available too after, of course.
The condition of approval number 8 from a year ago, it was revised that prior. So it says prior to recordation, the applicant shall revise the landscape plan to include additional vegetation plantings along the southern slope above Ascension. Do we have that revised landscape plan, or are we still working off the?
Yeah, the commission approved that in February of last year.
But then it had the condition that that plan needed to be revised to encompass plantings on that slope above Ascension. That was condition number 8.
Yes.
So there's not actually a plan to show that, you're saying?
Not yet. I mean, it will be revised consistent with that
Okay.
condition,
Well-
and we will not approve it until it is. I will say that subsequent to the initial review and approval of that plan and our consultations at the site with CAL FIRE, they expressed some concern about the amount of vegetation that was in that plan because of the fuel that it could create over the long run in terms of fire safety at this site. But at present, I think what was at issue in that review of the landscaping plan was that there was a need for additional plant material on both the Bel Air and the Ascension slopes to green them up a little bit. So that is what we intend to do. And some of the plant material that was removed, some of the shrubs or Baccharis shrubs, some of them will resprout. Some of them won't, and we will require that the landscaping plan be embellished to sort of fill in any gaps that exist. Although, again, there needs to be some thought to spacing of these kinds of plants so that we don't create a fire safety issue.
I agree that particularly the pines that spread themselves are a concern. So the current landscape plan clearly shows X marks for all the trees to be removed and shaded areas where shrubs and trees were to remain. And so, I mean, I could see that this was going to be clear cut. This wasn't a surprise. And, but still, it appears from the photos above Bel Air that it's been major vegetation removal outside the limit of work. It seems like it is in areas that were shaded to not be touched. And so I'm just concerned that, so what is the timing of the restoration for the past erosion and the recent landscape removal outside the limit of work? Now, this area where now there's been significant disturbance of the soil, and if this is just from my perspective as a landscaper, if you don't put this in place before the next rainy season, next fall, you're going to have a heck of a lot of weeds. And the best you could hope for now that it's been disturbed would be, so I mean, in the grading plan, I guess my concern is this restoration for this outer area, the timing of that is important because of what's the Pandora's box that's been opened by all this soil disturbance.
That's a really good question. So first, the grading plan contemplates wrapping up all grading activities, including the repair of those eroded slopes, this summer. And so although the grading plan, as will be presented to you soon, extends into September, most of that activity is paving and curb installation. It's not moving dirt in those. And so by that time, the repairs will have been done. The required hydroseeding will have been put in place. And some of the plant material so one of the things that we didn't require is the sort of timing of the planting. But we will ensure that planting is done in places where there's potential for unstable slopes and erosion in the fall, which would be timely from the standpoint of oncoming rains, we hope. Even if some of the areas aren't planted out this fall, and probably some of them won't be. It's likely that it's required that they install erosion control protection over those areas, so there won't be.
Can there be hydroseeded?
It will be. The hydroseed will happen regardless. Okay. That'll happen immediately after the grading is finished. And then the erosion control material will be put in place to stabilize.
I got a question. So our tree protection is done at what you said it looks like the maximum possible. So how did we lose the tree? What caused?
The tree, there was a somewhat rambunctious contractor on site, and hence some of the shrubs that were taken out that none of us expected to be removed. And the one tree was in an area that was we didn't think we needed to protect it because there was no work in that area. As Commissioner Ketchum mentioned, there's these sort of out of the project areas of the site, and we just didn't expect that it was going to be necessary to protect that tree, and unfortunately it was. the contractor removed it unbeknownst to the applicant, and so we are going to enforce our policies as they require.
Considering it's, the trees have always been a sensitive issue, I hope that we've taken it to the maximum that we can, pressure we can apply. Because I think, this is, was a sensitized issue for years. And, allowing it to happen is not a good thing. My own experience, since I don't live far from this area, the current work that's being done by another contractor, their routing is sucks. If you're going from Crystal Springs Shopping Center, driving up, you don't know what's going to come, and they just close off the road, and you have to figure out how to get through the neighborhood to get somewhere else. And it isn't fun going on that street. I can't think of the name of the street for the life of me at the moment. But
Los Altos?
excuse me,
Los Altos? No. Anyway,
Parrot.
Parrot.
Yeah, Parrot. Parrot. The one when they were working on Parrot, is just, I do worry about how they just let you figure out your own way, how long you're going to have to wait or don't wait, or it's minimum from that point. Conflicting with the route. That's just my concern going into today. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you.
Okay, so I'd like to hear from the applicant.
Yes, we have Alex Henson and Ryan McGee from Lee and Braze here to present this to you.
Testing. First of all, good morning, everybody. Planning Commission members, San Mateo County representatives, and the public who are here joining us today. Again, my name is Ryan McGee with Lee and Braze Engineering. We're the project civil for this Ascension Heights project. So the purpose of this presentation is to, is to satisfy conditions of approval, item 14 of the grading permit conditions for the Planning Commission to approve the grading operation schedule. Given public concern, we would also like to review the project schedule activities, grading phasing requirements, and then later on also address some of the previously mentioned concerns and further clarify any of the erosion control mitigation measure questions that were brought up at the September 25th meeting as well. And starting us off, we'll kind of discuss the project schedule. So first of all, the schedule has been revised so that the grading will not take place within the moratorium, October 15th through April 15th. In fact, the grading will not take place until May 4th now, which also satisfies the condition of approval item 10, as mentioned in the previous hearing. The Phase 1 grading, inclusive of the temporary Cal Water access road and Cal Water infrastructure relocation, will hopefully begin, assuming we get approval, on May 14th and end July 10th. So in front of you is the revised schedule of the Phase 1 grading operations. As mentioned previously, May 4th would be the start, and the completing of Phase 1 grading is July 10th. As for Phase 2 grading, this is inclusive of the remainder of the mass grading, some utility work, and paving. This will begin June 15th with the current schedule and end September 30th. In front of you again is the revised schedule for the Phase 2 grading operations. What we really want to express during this Planning Commission hearing is that the phasing of the grading and utility routing will occur not only outside of the wet weather season, but it's also required by Cal Water in order for us to cut in the new driveway and the beginning. So we had to make the adjustments to the schedule per everybody's concerns last time. So we're going to walk you through kind of the grading sequencing. So in front of you is the current existing conditions. There's a existing Cal Water access road, a water line that runs from Bella Road to the Cal Water property, and the water lines from Cal Water's property to Parrot Drive, kind of in the top right-hand corner of the screen. Once again, Cal Water has made it very clear that they require access to the property and the water lines be operational at all times during the phasing of construction, which is the primary drive for why we had to do the phasing and the grading operations the way we have. So first, a secondary temporary Cal Water access road will be reconstructed. Then a portion of the existing 10-inch water line that runs from Bel Air Road to Cal Water's property will also be relocated. This work is required before the temporary roadway, seen in later exhibits, can be installed, which will allow haul trucks to access the site by taking a right-hand turn from Bel Air Road to ensure access is always maintained. Secondly, grading in the northeast corner of the lot is required for relocating the existing Cal Water line and emergency drain line that runs from the Cal Water property to Parrot Drive. The work was planning to start on May 4th and planning to end on June 12th. Next, the temporary road will be graded, installed from Bel Air Road to the Cal Water property with the first portion. Oh, sorry. So this was the. Sorry. I don't think I can laser on the screen because it's TV. But on the presentation for those who are in the crowd, this is the portion of the relocation of the road and the water line. Here's the existing. Here's the new. And then for the grading to be done for that emergency drain line, it's in the top right-hand corner, and then this is when the water line relocation will happen, all of it within the dates. The temporary road will be graded, installed from Bel Air Road to the Cal Water property. With the first portion relocated, the new entrance construction can occur, and access to the water tank will be maintained. The new water lines will be installed from Bel Air Road to the Cal Water property, following the temporary roadway. Hold on, I think I'm one slide off. Sorry about that, everybody. So that's the new access road, and then that's the existing road, and that was the previous work. So the new water lines would be installed from Bel Air Road to the Cal Water property following the new temporary roadway. Once the temporary roadway is completed and the water lines are connected to Cal Water property, the existing relocated access road and relocated water lines can be removed, which would then allow for us to install this new road. Phase 2 grading. Sorry, I think I lost my place. I apologize, everybody. Bear with me. So the next phase would be the remainder of the mass grading, which would be between June 15th and August 7th. The reason for this is to kind of prepare the project for the new roadway to go in that stretches from this corner of the property up to here. As you can see, there will be a new water line installed as well. That water line is required for the new subdivision to provide water to all the potential homes of the future. Once again, this project currently is not including the development of the homes. It's only until paved surface and utilities are installed. As you can see at the bottom left-hand corner, the erosion scarping mitigation will also be a part of this with the remainder of the mass grading. Now that we will have this access road and the water lines for Cal Water, now that we had already previously relocated, we could tie this in. And then once that's completed, we would be moving on into paving. As mentioned by Joe earlier, the July 27th through September 30th work, one concern was that we were getting close to the grading moratorium in the wet weather season. The work that's being done between July 27th and the 30th of September are new concrete driveways, new sidewalks, new curbs. So we're not doing any major grading. The grading's already been done. It's just paving work, and the utilities have already been installed for the water. So there might be some utility work, but we're not talking massive mountains moving or any grading being done to where there's going to be a huge truck haul issue. So some of the concerns, one of the main reasons for the proposed truck haul route is, first of all, maneuverability of the trucks. So before you is the existing roadway that connects Bel Air Road and the Cal Water property. Here's a picture of the driveway as you're heading up Bel Air Road. So we've simulated using software in our office the right-hand turn from Bel Air Road with the specified vehicle specifications. As you can see, in order for the truck to make the right-hand turn with the existing conditions, we'd have to grade the driveway and remove existing trees and a portion of the neighbor's fence, shown in green. It's kind of hard to see because it's kind of a lime green. But basically, in order to make that right-hand turn, as was requested at the previous Planning Commission hearing, the truck would have to drive through what is currently a fence, remove some pine trees that we've worked really diligently to make sure our grading plan doesn't affect per the neighbor's request. And we'd kind of have to remove and do some additional paving there, which kind of seems a little excessive when we can use a roadway coming down from the other side. We also tried simulating a 3-point turn or a multi-point turn for those trucks. And even after a 3-point turn shown in front of you, the trucks basically get stuck in the middle of Bel Air Road. So we wanted to take that option as another feasible option to help reduce having them going through the neighborhood. But unfortunately, they can't make that turn. There's a header there. It's going the opposite direction of the way the road is currently traveling. So from there, we decided during our initial studies, the best accessibility for the project is coming down Bel Air Road, shown with this Google image in front of you. After simulating that with the same software, it can be seen that the trucks have no issues entering or exiting using the existing conditions. They will also require no disturbance to the existing access, trees, or the neighboring property. One of the main concerns expressed during the last Planning Commission hearing was, why is the driveway entrance not cut in first so that all trucks can access the site turning right from Bel Air, which is a feasible question to ask. And as previously mentioned, one of the main reasons is to maintain Cal Water's access and making sure all their water lines between Parrot and Bel Air are in operations at all time during construction. We actually have to do that work first before we can then cut in the driveway, or we would be undermining the access road and the pipe would be sticking out of the ground, which is not good best management practices in terms of construction. So here we go. Looking at this image in front of you, if the access road and water line remained in place as we did the grading per the geotechnical specifications, you can see in red, that's the existing roadway, the Cal Water access roadway that has the water line running through it. And you can see our grading for that new temporary roadway goes right through it. And once again, it would undermine the road, which is not safe. It would also expose the existing water line, which doesn't maintain both of Cal Water's requirements of making sure all water lines are operational and that their access roads are accessible in the event they need to get up to the project at any time during the construction. The new access road and entry will be completed on July 10th. This means the trucks can access the site via Bel Air Road 2 months into construction after starting May 4th. And before, use the simulation of the truck completing the right-hand turn from Bel Air. So once again, 2 months into construction after everything's been relocated, temporary roadways have been installed, we can start cutting out this roadway for Bel Air, and then we're not using the entire construction schedule for driving through the entire neighborhood. It's just that's what's required those 2 months before we can actually get this roadway cut in, and then the truck haul route will actually be reduced significantly. So some of the other concerns brought forth during Planning Commission hearing in September was the grading time frame. So starting off, grading once again will start May 4th, which is after the 15th, which is required per the grading moratorium. Also, it was brought up that the conditions of approval say no, it's actually April 30th. So taking that in consideration, we moved it to May 4th so that we're meeting the conditions. We're also meeting the grading criteria that are set forth by the county. We understand that climate change also affects when it rains, and so moving it to May instead of middle of April actually helps in the sense of that there may be less likely possibilities of rain during the grading construction. And although it may rain into or beyond May, we've also prepared an erosion contingency plan provided later on in this presentation and also in the follow-up. And it's required by the state to conduct weekly meetings or inspections based on the stormwater pollution prevention plans, also known as SWIP. Another concern was that there were Rainbow Drive landslides. Joe kind of hit on that earlier, so I'm not going to go into further detail. The truck haul route length, it was worried that, there would be, it's a long travel to get to the project, but as previously shown, unfortunately, per what we're given and what is required by Cal Water's accessibility and operations, there's not really another alternative that we saw that seemed feasible without doing additional work like removing trees, fencing, and encroaching onto someone else's property. I think it's 1450 Parrot Drive, not 1538. Those are both the trees we were worried about. So the 72-hour erosion contingency plan that will be put in place includes not only inspections by the contractor, but the qualified SWIP practitioners, AES, which is required by San Mateo County, their consultant, and San Mateo County leading up to any raining event. So if anybody has any further questions about the contingency plan, we can go further into detail afterward. Tree protection was a concern. It's been installed on site. Trees planned for removal have been removed. Once again, unfortunately, some additional shrubs and one tree was cut down. It wasn't physically removed, so the roots are still in place from an erosion control standpoint, but it was cut down, and Joe kind of already talked about the reasoning behind it and moving forward, obviously making sure that we're being more diligent, holding people more accountable for what's going on because it is a sensitive issue, as you had mentioned earlier, Planning Commissioner Hanson. Tree protection has been brought up in the past about the two properties, 1450 and 1538 Parrot Drive. So working with the arborist in the past, we revised the plans not to encroach past certain areas within certain drip lines that seemed reasonable and would maximize the amount of protection to prevent any tree damage. They also talked about doing air spades and hand digging in the areas just to really make sure that these trees are taken care of and they're not just what's the term? They're not neglected. We don't want to do that. One thing that was brought up in the last Planning Commission hearing also was the City of San Mateo haul route approval. So we have received the City of San Mateo's approval of the section that is under their jurisdiction, not the counties. They didn't see any problems with the previous truck haul route that we had proposed at the last Planning Commission meeting. Public safety. Our schedule was revised, so grading will be after the moratorium and then some. So that should help with people's worries about it grading during the rains as well. And also the grading is estimated to finish August 7th, which is well before the grading moratorium of October 1st. And the other work that's between August 7th and September 30th is paving and utilities. So they're not doing mass earthworks and hauling. And lastly, as mentioned earlier by Joe, there was some biological safety concerns that were brought up about the dusky-footed wood rats. They were relocated to another part on this project, or on the site that's outside of all of the construction, even the trail, everything. We wanted to make sure we were moving them outside of any potential zones for construction. And the tree removal was completed outside of the nesting season, which is February 1st through August 31st. So I'd like to open up the opportunity for Planning Commission, public, anyone who has any relevant questions to this presentation. And Alex and I from Lee and Braze will be available to answer questions. Joe is available to answer questions. So I don't know where you want to start the questions.
No, I don't have question at this.
I have some questions. Due to the fact that the tree was removed and the response giving, it might not be so acceptable in saying that somebody just cut the tree. And this coupled with the concern of the neighbor that they feel like if they had done this type of action, how are we going to make the developer accountable and make them to adhere to the contract in the future, having said that they have violated or they removed something that it was not supposed to be removed. That's the concern the neighborhood has, and I myself have that concern, especially to the fact that we have a schedule of grading that prohibited the grading from October to 3 months later down the road in the wet area of the wet season. And the condition of the area, the climate change and everything is very hard to predict when will be rain and when will not be raining. So if I have to deal with, as a neighbor, with the developer who have violated in the past something that he's not supposed to do, so what make me feel as a neighbor that they're going to be complying with the non-grading period that they're not supposed to be grading. Also, I was gonna ask and this concern that some of the neighborhood brought via email that says about the water being used. Is that water being used directly from the sources, like a sort of like a free water, or is it gonna be something that developer will be paying for the water they used and it will not be affected to the pressure and water consumption from the neighbor?
So from the water standpoint, going the most recent question you asked, I have some exhibits I can show you. We've already gotten approval from Cal Water to use the water. There's already been a water meter paid for that's tapped off of the fire hydrant through the developer. And so all of the water that will be used to fill the 4,000 gallon truck is paid for by the developer and has already been approved that it's acceptable to be drawn from per Cal Water.
Okay.
And I can show you the exhibit that shows that if you would request.
Okay. In regard with my first concern,
So to narrow it down, so your question is, how can the neighborhood trust someone who may have violated something like their trust that they've had with each other in the county? I would start off with, we are all humans. We all do make mistakes. We're never 100% of the time. Unfortunately, it happened. There's nothing we can do about that now. Moving forward, what we can do is really ensure and really monitor all the construction that's being done. Now that we have AES with Sequoia Ecological and the contractor and everything, as for the existing trees that were really the really large ones, everything's fenced off for the neighboring properties at 1538, 1450, walking with the project arborist. We were told here are these very specific lines you can't. So for 1538, there's an existing fence on the property, and we're told we can't grade anywhere past that fence. Really gives a nice physical barrier to prevent that tree from being damaged. For the ones at 1450, there's a wooden header that comes up the existing Bel Air or the existing Cal Water access road, and the arborist has made it very clear to us, and we've revised the plans accordingly when we submitted quite a ways back, that no grading or walls are to extend beyond that, because that gives those pines and those cedars that are there a physical barrier to prevent any damages from happening or any health issues with the safety or health and safety issues with those trees. Does that kind of answer your question?
yeah. But the grading section the non-grading for certain area of the wet season, considering the changing of the weather condition and the climate change in the Bay Area, maybe the wet season may not be a wet season. It may be a regular season, and the one that they are projecting to be raining season, it will be raining season. Had the contractor or the developer consider a flexible change on the commitment of the schedule for the grading in that sense?
I would say for the grading, we already pushed it to May 4th instead of April 15th, April 30th. We don't know necessarily when it's going to rain, right? That's why we give this window of this date to this date. But seeing as how the grading is to be completed by August 7th, and the original threshold was October, we don't foresee rain in August. If we do, that's why we have these erosion contingency plans in place, where there's a 72-hour window and a 24-hour and a 48-hour window where the SWIP inspectors have to go out there per state, make sure everything's in place when they know a rain event is coming, and then inspect it. Everything's to the T per the state's requirements. And then when it does rain, it's protected to the best of its ability. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think.
I'm going to follow up on that. So the fact that this tree and shrubs were cut in the, that shouldn't have been cut, it's totally unacceptable. So what can you do to reassure us that going forward you will have procedures in place so that it will not happen again? So things that are not supposed to happen out of place at a time will not happen again. Do you have all your contractors? Have you spoken to them and made them aware of all the regulations that you have to abide by? Do you have that?
So as the civil engineer, we are providing the plans for it to be executed off of. We aren't typically out there unless for inspections to make sure everything is happening to the T. That's for the construction manager and the developer and the environmental consultants to take care of, because they're supposed to be on site for certain aspects of the project. I would say, going to your first point, something as simple as adding additional tree protection in areas that we didn't think tree protection was needed could be a benefit, because then we know for a fact we can go to sleep at night and know that nobody's going to be removing any trees from those areas because once again, there's a physical barrier from preventing them to do so. It's a thought.
Okay. I think that there should be something in place that, the contracts are aware that there are consequences for them, not abiding by the rules. Because I think right now the trust has been broken somewhat. But at the same time, I want to say in regards to the schedule, I think you're correct that now you're moving past the rainy season, and the way things are looking right now, I think that unfortunately we may not get any more water, which is not good. But it is important to me that once you start, that you maintain that schedule to the T, so that you are in and you're out in the least amount of time, so that the neighborhood can be back to being, just a normal routine for the neighborhood. So the question is, it's important that, or I would recommend that, make sure that your contractors, the hauling contractors, that there's a contingency planned in case you have broken down trucks, that make sure you have enough trucks available so that there's never a disruption, that you may have to wait for trucks or anything like that, to make sure that everything flows once you get started.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you for that advice. I appreciate it.
Just on your question, Alex Henson with Lee and Braze as well. So the tree that was removed, as Joe mentioned, was in a different area, so the protection wasn't thought to be in that area. The tree protection has been installed and has been reviewed by the county and the third-party consultant AES, who does the ecological review of the site. When construction starts for the major construction, there will be meetings with all of the contractors. Just as Ryan's saying, the physical barrier that's there is a boundary that everyone can see before, but now we do have the tree protection up. It is fenced off. These areas are protected now, so there will be meetings with all of the grading contractors moving forward, with the developer, with AES, with the county, to make sure that all of these items are being met and followed. There also is weekly inspections, as he mentioned, so these are opportunities where we can review grading activities weekly and make sure that nothing is being overstepped. We had this one instance where the tree was removed, but again, there will be these meetings throughout construction to make sure that everything's on schedule, that different areas are happening at the same time. Trucks that are coming and going are being scheduled so that there is no cross-traffic influence coming in and out of that site. Those are all contained. They're not specified in the schedule because that wasn't required, but there will be these meetings on site with all the developers and all the contractors that will be brought onto the project for the main grading activity that happens.
Okay, that would be good. Thanks.
I,
Please.
I'm glad that you are putting these things in place, because apparently they were not in place, and that's why this cutting of a tree happened, which shouldn't have been, because I'm sure it's a sizable area to cover, and make sure that everything is spelled out, and it doesn't happen, because trust is very important, and all these neighbors and the residents right around there, they are very nervous about what will happen tomorrow. So please make sure that that is happening. The other point that I have is, you talk about that the trucks will be tarped when going downhill with the load, but when things are coming up, brought up to the site, at that time they should also be tarped, because otherwise all that dust is blowing in the air and becomes difficult for residents to continue to live there. So what is the plan for that?
Are you referring to the trucks that are coming up empty loaded? Because they're coming up through the neighborhood empty loaded, then they're going to the site through coming down Bel Air, accessing the site, filling up, tarping up when there's soil within the actual vehicles, and they're staying tarped all the way until they get to the dump site. Then they unload. Typically, haul trucks aren't tarped coming back when they're empty because there isn't a need for it. You can specify if, I mean, that's just pretty typical construction that we've seen over the years of
And you
experience.
how will you make sure that, because this construction will go on for some time, this is only the grading part, and then there are other things happening, and the dust is blowing in the air. It could be windy, even an empty truck. It could be windy. Truck is not completely clean, right? So is there any thought that goes behind that to make it as comfortable air quality for the neighbors there?
Yeah. So the trucks, as Ryan mentioned, coming up, everything coming brought to the site, materials and everything will be packaged, will be tarped. The empty trucks, when they're loaded, they also have to meet their own regulations to make sure that they're not leaving enough material that's going to cause a problem for the roadway. So those trucks are left open when they are empty, but the trucks are installed with tarps. So those tarps could be pulled at any time to protect for any, remainder of that portion. So that's not a concern from our perspective, because the trucks will be empty. They have the measures in place to be tarped when full or when there are a necessity for that item to be covered.
So how long do you see what is shown on the schedule? I see till the end of September, right? So that is the time when there's dirt being hauled.
Correct.
Correct?
Yeah, so there'll be, and as I mentioned, there'll be inside, and as a requirement for our permit with the county, we have these third-party reviewers. There will be people on site watching when these activities are happening to make sure that the trucks are getting tarped when they're leaving with full dirt loads so that there is no concern for, and then we have the erosion control measures and the dust control measures for street sweeping daily, for watering the site, making sure there's no, the dust control is controlled on site. And then the trucks themselves are installed with the tarps so that they're controlling the off-site.
Okay, thank you. One more question that I have is about this pre-cleanup that has already been done, right? And neighbors are very concerned about all this being denuded. Was the whole area that was cleaned up required to be done at this time, or could it have been done a little? Portions could have been delayed.
So a part of the schedule was also the nesting period. So the removal of these trees had to occur before the nesting period began. So that's why that was done now. All the trees that were removed, minus the one instance, were permitted through the county. So all of that removal was through the county. And so all those areas that were disturbed are part of the project area that are getting graded for the future development. The erosion control measures that are happening now are blanketing throughout all of these areas, mulching some of the areas that are left with the natural grasses. There are some bare spots that were left open. So those areas are being mulched. So all the native grasses that were left are left to control that erosion control. But yeah, all the trees that were removed with permit, minus that one instance where we spoke of with the tree that was removed before.
Okay, thank you.
Go ahead.
Oh, one thing, maybe this is in the category of locking the barn door after the horse was stolen, but do you have on this landscape plan the line around the project called limit of work, and where it adjoins the slope on Ascension and Bel Air? Could that be staked with some bright colored flags on them so that when they're racing around with their bulldozers, they don't overstep like they did with the tree removal? I mean,
So when the grading operations begin, the property will be staked and boundaried for not only for that reason, but so the contractor can understand where elevations are coming and going with the site as we mold in the new roads and everything. So all that will be staked out. Like I mentioned, there will be weekly meetings with these contractors, so we are ensuring that everyone's working within the sections that they're supposed to be working on to follow this schedule.
So this plan, the line on here, limit of work, is that meant to mean that bulldozers won't be crossing over that line while they're doing the grading?
Correct, which is why we're moving this access road around, so
Right.
that there will be this permanent access road for access to the site for the construction measures, and all of the equipment will be within that limit of work.
Thank you.
I got a couple questions. Can you walk through with me the erosion control measures at the corner of Bel Air and Ascension? I understand how the other ones are corrected, but that's the one that visually looks the worst. And, how did you mitigate the causes? And I can see how you are landscaping it, but I'd like to know how you're removing the causes.
So what the current approved plans show on the civil plans is, and I can actually bring up a couple exhibits if that helps you out visually. So here are some of those areas. So this is the corner, and this is further down Ascension. So basically what is to be done is it's to be regraded, and the area in red that is shown is the required amount of permanent erosion control to be installed. I think it's a 25-foot radius all the way around all of it to ensure that the slope is stable. And while any of the grading on site is performed, the geotechnical engineer of record is there. And if any reasons, any specifics that need to be installed to help ensure that this erosion scarping is performed and constructed properly, they will be there on site to ensure that it is actually mitigated in the way it should be.
So the plan is to use natural try to make a natural curve so there's more sheet flow of the water. Is that how you're doing this?
So the pre-existing conditions before the scarping happened was grading. The natural grading was flowing in that direction. So our goal is to grade it back to the kind of pre-existing conditions. And then from there is to stabilize with permanent erosion control measures and any other requests per the geotechnical engineer, because they're the expert on soil stability. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, okay. My next questions are quality of life issues, because those are the ones I get a lot of phone calls on. Where's everybody parking?
All the parking for construction will be on site, since it is a relatively large site, and because we are phasing the grading, we do feel it is adequate that the construction workers will have available parking on site and won't be taking up Ascension or Bel Air or people's personal driveways. Hopefully not,
So I'm just trying to imagine this in my head, so just help me. So when you're putting in that temporary roads, your access into the site is gone, so they can't park on site, right?
So technically, here, I'll go to the exhibit to show you. Technically, the entryway for the relocation of the road is not altered because we need it to be consistently connected for Cal Water to access. So in this slide, that's the existing. Here's the new. As you hold on.
So they'll both simultaneously be in existence, allowing
Correct.
people up there to park.
So the looped one at the bottom is the existing. You can see where it ties in partway up the roadway, where we're going to put in the new temporary roadway to the Cal Water property. Once that's been installed and everything's okay with Cal Water in terms of accessibility, and they sign off for that and the water line relocation, that bottom line gets removed. So you've got existing, you've got the proposed road with existing, and then you've got removal of the existing.
So people will be parking kind of in the northern part of the road.
Yeah.
And you'll have enough space for everybody.
Yeah, we feel there will be
yes.
adequate space for parking for construction, yes.
Okay. Are flag men going to be used for traffic control, to allow knowing people how they can get through, other than a lot of times things just barriers go up and, you got to go find your way through. I mean, what type of thing makes my life easier trying to access top of the hill to the bottom of the hill?
So there will be flagmen present for that specific reason because it's required for like traffic control purposes. And I'm under the impression that there will also be signage because for detours and for truck haul routes, they have some form of signage that shows them the route they need to be going. And if a homeowner is going to be turning up a road that is closed off, like the one you had mentioned earlier, Crystal Springs or wherever it may be, the proper signage is required in order for them to not get to that dead end and go, oh man, now I got to turn all the way around and go all the way back through. And
Yeah. Will there be future notification like, in 10 days there'll be construction on this for those students who cut through to go to CSM? No, don't be in a panic when day one comes and look for a new route out or in.
So currently for the proposal of this, there is no streets that are being closed for this work. The flagmen are
So
for
there's
access.
no
Yes.
closure.
Yeah, so the closure
just
of the
at the
road that
entrance.
you spoke of right on the other side is for the water line
Okay.
installation is through Cal Water. This proposal has no closures of roads, so the truck haul route is not interrupting or closing streets. The flagmen are for access in and out to make sure that those trucks coming in and out are, that they're not cutting off traffic, that they're controlling the flow in and out of the property.
What's your anticipated impact time for me as a driver waiting?
In terms of minutes, I mean, we're just
We're talking
accessing
about minutes.
a truck to turn from Bel Air into the property once that new entrance is installed. Once the current entrance is, there would be no disruption of traffic because they're entering just across in that little portion.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No? Thank you very much. We'll now open this up for public comment. And if you haven't filled out a yellow card and wish to speak, please do so and bring it forward to Janeth.
Okay, first speaker is Craig. I'm sorry? Where do you get yellow cards? So, sorry. First speaker is Craig Nishizaki, followed by Lois Aldwin, and each speaker will have 5 minutes.
Good morning. My name is Craig Nishizaki, and I'm from Responsible Development for Water Tank Hill, and I live on Parrot Drive. First off, I really appreciate the planning commissioners, all the questions that were being asked of the developer. You really listened to our concerns, and as a member of RDWTH, I get the complaints. I get why does my pool have all this dirt in there? Why are they working on Sunday? And actually, 9 a.m. I got woken up on a Sunday. After the prior week, it was Cal Water working all in front of us on Parrot Drive, the development going on with all the tree cutting, and then the one day that we expected to be a quiet day, and they're working. And it took hours before this was resolved. So the response time is not good. But there's a general pattern here, and we're worried about this. The developer is pushing the boundaries, and in some cases violating those conditions that were agreed to. And this is just the very start of the development. So we're very worried. And reading the staff report does not give us comfort. We appreciate a lot of the clarity that came out in the meeting already, about the parking, that was a big concern. The water, that was also a big concern. So I appreciate those levels of details. Why it wasn't in the official report, there's a lot of concern there. We really, in this, we've always had concerns, but these last 2 months now, we don't trust this development. It was mentioned, we don't trust this development. And we feel that it's been sloppy so far, and there's not enough details, and it's just the bare minimum requirements that are being done. For example, the flag traffic. My understanding is there's flagment only on Bel Air at the site entrance. Well, if the truck routes are going through Rainbow, Lakeshore, and Bel Air, those are on narrow streets. They're coming in, and when they leave the site, they're going to go right on Bel Air, they're going to go right on Lori Lane and down Parrott. And from Parrott, I know from the Cal Water work, they had flagment because on Parrott Drive, you're essentially going to turn it into a one-way road with the trucks leaving the site. And so we're requesting, we would like the Planning Commission to require flagmen, not just at the site, but on the entire route. If they have to come through the neighborhood, please protect the neighbors on all the narrow streets, Rainbow, Bel Air, Lakeshore, Lori Lane, and Parrott. And I don't think that's a big ask, and I think it will really protect the neighborhood. We already know from the Cal Water, and we appreciate the flagment that they had, and they made it a safe environment to be able to drive, to be able to walk in and be able to drive and ride your bike. So we would appreciate that, and we appreciate all that the Planning Commission has done. The tarp, just again about details. My understanding is dirt is not just coming off the site. They're going to have to bring fresh dirt on. They're going to bring sand. They're going to bring rocks. So in the report, just put that you're going to tarp it both coming into the site and leaving. Don't leave those details out. So again, there's just so much missing in here. We appreciate the water being taken care of. The grading plan, one of the, Donald Nagel and I went to the planning department to look at the grading plans. And at that point, there were 6 or 7 phases. And the lots, I think there were 4, lots 4, 11, and 12 were meant to be in the last phase. Now, all of a sudden, that's changed. And again, it's just some concern that there was an original plan that we reviewed, and now all of a sudden it's changed. So the erosion control, there's been a lot of talk about removing the vegetation that shouldn't have been removed, and that it was all part of the plan and it's okay. Well, if you're going to denude the entire hill, you should have had the erosion control measure already planned so that the hay gets put on as part of the plan, not 3 weeks after the neighborhood had to complain about this. And that's the problem. Everything's reactive. We really need to see a more detailed plan and just the developer more conscious of the neighborhood. And we're just trying to live here. And we already are so scared about this. We're getting so many complaints to you guys, to us, about the dirt and the traffic and the noise, and it's just going to get really bad. So again, I hope that you can put in some measures that will protect the neighborhood or request them. One of the things is I think a community meeting. We talked with Director Monowitz. I think come to the neighborhood, have the developer come to the neighborhood, and we should have a meeting, prepare the neighborhood for what's going to happen. And also maybe, you're having follow-up meetings with the contractors. Why not have a monthly meeting with the neighborhood as the development's going on? Come to the neighborhood. We can have a meeting at CSM, but that would really assure the neighbors
I need you to wrap up.
Yeah, I know. It would give us confidence. And so we'd like the Planning Commission to request that for them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next is Louise Aldwin.
Hi, my name is Lois Aldwin, and I live at 179 Lakeshore Drive. My concern, very, very deeply, is the haul route. I drive up Ascension, around Rainbow, up Lakeshore, every day. There are 4 spots where you cannot see what is coming down at you. And these spots are very dangerous, plus the intersection of where there's a stop sign on Lakeshore, but not on the cross street of Enchanted, where you can't see either side of Enchanted because of the curve of the hill. And these are spots where the trucks are going to run into neighborhood cars. Also, on Rainbow Drive, there is a house that was rebuilt after the house in the slide of the 1990s fell down. They have been doing more concrete work on the foundation of this house because that hill continues to be unstable. And that is the very edge of Rainbow Drive. All those trucks are going to destabilize that road. And the fact that they're not putting flaggers at any of these spots means people are going to get hurt very badly. So I really object to this haul route with no safety mitigations for the neighbors trying to get out of their driveways. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next, we have Kim Rickett, followed by Laurel Nagel.
Hi, I'm Kim Rickett. I live at 1625 Ascension Drive, and I belong to the San Mateo Oaks Homeowners Association. First, I want to say thank you. I'd like to say thank you to the county for removing the wood rats. I really appreciate that. I'd also like to say thank you for requiring that any wet weather grading plan go back before the Planning Commission. Those were very important to me, and I feel like I was listened to, which I appreciate. I would also like to say thank you to the commissioners for taking our concerns about the recent tree removal seriously and the other neighborhood concerns. I'm going to kind of throw away my speech and just hit on a couple things because I don't want to repeat what's already been said. I do need to point out that it was not one tree that was removed. Dozens of trees were removed. One actually fell afoul of the tree removal guidelines, but numerous, 6 to 8 inch mostly pine, but also some oak trees were removed from the hill. The only part of this I saw was at the southern end of Ascension, which adjoins our homeowner association property. That's where the giant tree was removed on Ascension. Again, 6 to 8 other trees were removed. I don't know how many shrubs because it's really hard to see what's left behind from coyote brush. But there was a substantial amount of vegetation removed there, and an incredible amount of vegetation removed on Bel Air. Which brings me to my second point. Condition 8 of the landscape plan requires more planting on the Ascension slope. I've learned how important specific language is. Just adding the words Bel Air into that would make me much more comfortable. Is very often when all of this is forgotten, what everyone has said has been forgotten, we have the words on the paper. So adding the words Bel Air to that would make me feel much better. That would ensure that all the trees and vegetation that have been removed are replaced so that it looks like the landscape map that was approved. Third, as for a physical barrier, the applicant has put a chain link fence now around the bottom border along the streets. I have not seen a chain link fence on the top. I know Commissioner Ketchum, you mentioned staking or something like that. If they still have the chain link guys out there, just chain linking the whole out of scope area, I think would go a long way to protecting those trees. I don't know if that's in the plans or not. 4, a question that I'm hoping one of you will ask the county that might solve this whole haul route thing. Does the county have the ability to require additional flagmen if the need arises, or would language need to be added along the lines of applicant must provide 2 flagmen at the entrance of the site and additional flagmen as requested by the county? That means that if we did suddenly have a problem with trucks hitting cars or streets needing to be closed or extra flagmen being needed at blind corners, it would allow the county to be able to require the applicant to provide those, and it wouldn't fall on the sheriff to be maintaining traffic control. And then the last thing is, I still don't understand what's happening with the erosion at the corner. It sounds like they're just making it look nice and hoping for the best, but with the existing benches, all the water will still drain towards that corner. They did say that there would be a geotech guy on site during the grading, but that's not when the problem is going to happen because, as they say, they're not expecting rain. So things may look fabulous in August when they stop the grading, but when it starts raining in October and November, that's when we're going to see the problem, and that's when I want to know where the geotech engineer is. Thank you very much.
Next, we have Laurel Nagel, followed by Gary Trott.
Okay. Hi, I'm Laurel Nagel, president of the Baywood Park HOA. These are not exactly in order. They're just a few visual aids, but since most of the people have spoken about various things, I'll just bring up the topic as the picture comes up. This is what it looks like right now all along the Parrot Drive homes. So one of the questions is the uncovered area where the landscape screening is supposed to go, and when will that be planted in the sequence of these things? And what is the protection for the homes if something rolls down the hill? And I know that sounds silly, but my husband and I were home last week and a tree stump rolled down the hill, hit our neighbor's fence, actually knocked a couple planks loose. It happened to be, the guy on the hill jumped over the fence and banged him back in, and it seems fine, but that made us realize maybe there should be a little extra protection or procedure, especially because in looking at all the grading plans, that gets steeper, especially those first couple of homes there. That doesn't get graded lower, that gets graded steeper. They're bringing in soil. So that's just a concern there. Okay, well, you knew I was gonna talk about the trees. So there is a little confusion. There is a chain link fence around the trees right now. It's the top one, which is awesome. We're really happy with that, but we don't know, is that what you're suggesting, the engineers? There's no signage on it. We still see civil engineering plans that show where that the tree protection zone as written on those plans stops. It only goes up to where that red dot is. And you have the rerouted Cal water line going in where the blue dot is, which is 10 feet. And just looking again at all these new grading plans, somewhere around that red dot, again, the land gets steeper because they're trying to make that property get high enough to reach the road that they're making. So I appreciate there's a lot of talk, but right now where that chain link fence is, the grading plans show a lot of grading going on. So we're still nervous. We also would like, at some point there was a mention of a bond, some value put on those trees. We haven't heard any more, but they aren't, $5,000 trees. They're 75 years old. They add value to our home, not only for the aesthetic of our home, but because they also will block out the hill. So we're concerned about all of those issues. Let's see what the next picture is. Oh, well, these are just for anyone who hasn't been to the hill. The top one is an old Google map. You can see there was a lot of green. Now there's no green up there at all. And since trucks could go all over the hill, we assume that we can do more than sprinkle acorns, but that people could actually dig holes and put in plants, since they got trucks everywhere and they were fine with that. And then those little lines on that bottom picture, those are some of the things that were cut on Ascension. That's Bel Air right now. That was before they covered up Parrot. And when we hear some shrubs were cut down, they really cut everything down. So there really isn't much there to think is gonna grow back. And obviously that's an erosion concern. My final comment is about the oversight. This project has been a little bit, let's ask for forgiveness, not ask for permission. And that does not instill confidence. We have an oversight person, but he's in Sacramento. So for example, Sunday when they were working and we called, he couldn't reach anybody. It's not that the person we have a contract with is a problem. He's responsive. He can't reach people. The Oak neighbor complaint talked to us about it before it was cut, but we couldn't reach anybody to stop it. So, and Trent's in Sacramento, so he can't come and stop it. So we need a tightening up of that operation. And on the tree stuff, if somebody could put in writing what's actually what, that would be great. Thank you.
Next, we have Gary Trott, followed by Brandon Purcell.
Hi, my name is Dr. Gary Trott. I live on Parrot Drive, and every time I come to this project, it's changing. And so one of my questions really is who's responsible for the control documents in the project and for when things change naturally on site. I'll give you a couple examples. This morning, the drawings that you saw, EX3, EX4, and EX5, those are new drawings to me. I've looked on the county website. I looked in the staff reports. I didn't see those exact drawings. They've changed because I was looking for the entrance issues. There's actually another choice for the entrance issue. I don't know if it's useful or not. But to one of the other points, the trucks on Rainbow Drive, they may be empty in the beginning, but sometime later in the project, they're going to have gravel in for gravel deliveries to the site. I don't know exactly when those gravel deliveries happen on the schedule, but every time they build a new road or construct a new road, they're going to need gravel coming into the site. So whether that's part and parcel with the new entry, I don't know. But then the other thing I just want to leave you with quickly with, we have traffic jams on the freeways all the time. Those trucks, are going to come in large numbers. Who's going to manage the change when there's a traffic jam due to a truck? Either they got 5 of them in a row coming, or there's a breakdown or a car in the middle of the road, they can't get by. There will be traffic jams due to the trucks. You don't want them idling. That's a requirement of best practices. But if they're just all crawling up the hills 5 in a row, who's going to manage or deal with those kinds of changes? So it seems like we don't have a lot of control on the project. I don't know if it's at the county planning staff or the developer or the person on site, but the control seems not under change control. So thank you very much.
Brandon Purcell.
Hi, my name is Brandon Purcell. I live at 1438 Bel Air Road, which is the property directly across from the water tank access road. I also own the piece of property that's directly next to the access road. So there's a parcel of property that doesn't have a building or any house on it that actually abuts the access road that they're using. And I bring that up for a specific reason. I also picked up on this theme that Commissioner Santa Cruz picked up on very astutely, which is one of noncompliance with the trees that have already been mentioned. Well, I've asked the developer or the contractor, whoever's on site, not to park their vehicles on my property on that parcel of land that abuts the access road, and they continue to do so. I have some pictures which I sent to the commission yesterday, so unfortunately I didn't make the 5-day deadline. But this is a picture from yesterday of a large truck parked on my land. And I feel like if I were to drive a large truck onto one of the commissioner's front yards and park it there every day, you'd probably be pretty angry about that. And so, between this and the trees, I think that there's possibly one of two things going on. One is they'd rather ask for forgiveness than permission, right? They're just going to go ahead and do it and then pay the fine afterwards. The second, and which I think is even more probable, is just kind of gross mismanagement, right? Like there's not actually someone on site ensuring that the builders, the contractors are adhering to the guidelines that we're setting forth here. And that's a real problem, and something that I hope that you'll look into. A few more specific concerns. One is that there's actually foliage overhanging the access road. And that foliage comes from trees which are on my aforementioned property. I'm not sure that it provides enough clearance for a fully packed truck to get up there. And I don't want them cutting those tree limbs. The disruption of the traffic on Bel Air is going to have a significant impact on my family. We park our cars directly across the street from the access road, so I can only imagine the problems with huge trucks coming in and out. And then finally, and really most importantly to me, I'm lucky enough to have a 5-month-old son at home. And this the deforestation of that hill has already kicked up so much dust, and I'm really, really worried about air quality. I know that they're going to be putting tarmac or whatever on top of the tarps on top of the trucks, and that's great. But I don't want to get into another situation where there's a ton of dust, and later they're asking for forgiveness when there are all sorts of health problems in the community. So I really hope that there's specific language to deal with that in any future plans. And finally, I also just want to second the fact that I believe Bel Air should also be mentioned in that stipulation number 8, because that side of the road looks like it's really going to slip as well. Thank you.
Now, that's all the speaker cards I have, unless anyone else has any more.
Does anybody else wish to come forward to speak? Okay, with no objections, I'll close the public portion. Seeing none, it is closed. Can have staff respond to a whole slew of questions that arose.
Sure, I'll let our planning manager start, and then I'll fill in any gaps.
Thank you, Steve. I will first start by making staff's recommendation. We wanted to get the presentation for the applicant out of the way, and then recommend that the Planning Commission approve schedule of grading operations, including the haul routes, because they are consistent with the Board of Supervisors' adopted conditions of approval. So after listening to the variety of comments, I think that it's clear that there's some trust issues that need to be addressed, and I think that some of the measures that could be taken include requiring that all trucks, as was mentioned by the Ryan, the trucks can be tarped going in and out. There's no reason not to include that as part of the best management practices to avoid dust. One of the things that they didn't mention, they could have patted themselves on the back, but they didn't, is the materials being hauled to a wetland restoration site in Menlo Park. So all the cut material from this site is going to the Ravenswood Ponds South Bay Salt Pond Restoration Project to create a horizontal levee so that as sea level rises, we have fringe of marsh habitat around the edge of San Francisco Bay. Although the advantage of having that is that the trucks are going to travel on freeways from the sites where they dump all the way to the site, and if they're tarped when they leave that site, then they're not blowing all that dust out on the highway as they go along, because I don't think by the time they got to this site there'd be any dust left, given that they'd be traveling on 101 and 92 to get up here. I think the ensuring, we already required in the contract with AES, but I just want to reaffirm that there will be tailgate meetings with the general contractor, the subcontractors, AES, and their subconsultants, Sequoia Environmental, to alert the workers on site, both for the general contractor and subcontractors, of the need to adhere to the conditions of approval and best management practices, whether it's idling of equipment or so on. So I think that those matters will be addressed, and we'll ensure the tailgate meetings take place. We'll ask for reports from our consultant that those have indeed happened, and that the information is imparted to the contractors. I believe that having a meeting with the neighbors could also be a productive exchange. And we will ensure that plant material is installed when it can be. A lot of the areas where there's Ms. Nagel showed from, I guess she took a photograph from the property looking, looked like you were standing on the property, but anyway, that area is going to be where there's going to be water lines and irrigation lines and so on installed. So unfortunately, we won't be able to plant that early. But certainly erosion control measures will be in place. And on the Ascension and Bel Air sides, we can begin the planting early in those areas where there's not going to be grading and other construction work, to give that plant material a chance to take hold and of course, plant it during or just prior to the rainy season, so that it's got a good plant establishment chance. And I think that's all I have, Steve, if you want to.
Okay, so there were also requests for additional flaggers, and I think that would be perfectly appropriate for the Planning Commission and the department to include as a condition of approval that additional flaggers shall be provided as requested by the county. And let's see. I think there were concerns about gravel deliveries along Rainbow. My understanding is that all deliveries will come along a different route, and only empty trucks will be using Rainbow. So I'd like to confirm that with engineers. Yes, I'm getting an affirmative on that, so there will be no loaded trucks along Rainbow. There were some suggestions about changing Condition 8. Condition 8 is a condition of the Board of Supervisors approval, an action that was taken some time ago. So we can't change Condition 8. However, if there's some way you'd like to condition the approval of the grading plan to accomplish the same objective, I think we can do it. I'm not really seeing a nexus directly to the grading plan. It seems to be more related to the landscaping plan, which this commission has already approved, and we will make sure in terms of our condition compliance review that all aspects of that landscape plan, including the planting along Bel Air, is completed. And that concludes my response, but I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Let me ask a few questions. So is there a bond on the trees? That was one of the questions that came up.
I know that the applicant is responsible for mitigating any damage. I don't know if that was required through a bond. Joe, do you recall the specifics
Yes, there
of
is
that?
a bond required, and the sort of economics of this project are such that the hard card is a contingency on financing. So the bond will be posted by the contractor or by the developer applicant as required.
So I think the answer is the bond is required. It has not yet been funded, but it will be prior to the start of the grading.
Okay. On the site, I didn't see it, but doesn't mean it isn't there. Is there a sign that says who to call? You know, if I have a question, I want to have maybe a violation. Is there a phone number of who to call or an email address or something?
I don't believe there is, but I don't think staff would have any objection to requiring that as part of the grading approval.
Okay. Who is responsible for changes?
So the applicant is responsible for constructing the project in accordance with the plans that have been approved by the department, which must be consistent with the terms of your approval and the Board of Supervisors approval. If the applicant desires to stray from those plans, they are required to submit proposed revisions, at which point staff makes a determination as to whether or not those changes are a minor change that really has no potential for additional impacts, at which point we could approve them administratively, and we would issue a new set of approved plans to make sure that the revised plans are complied with. And then in the event the revisions are significant, then we would bring that back for the Planning Commission's review. So what's being reviewed and approved today is going to need to be complied with. It's the applicant's responsibility to do so. And both the department and our third-party consultant will make sure that it is built in accordance, and the grading is done in accordance with the plan approved today.
So the third-party consultant is kind of the oversight.
Particularly with regard to environmental mitigation measures. That's the scope of their contract. There are other things where the county would step in. So for example, with regard to flagging and road safety, we'll be working closely with Department of Public Works to make sure those issues are addressed, that it's not necessarily part of the scope of work for the third-party consultant.
More questions? Steph?
Oh, so in February 2019, the commission did amend Condition 8 of the landscape plan, and I would think that the nexus here would be that there the vegetation removal outside the area of work changes the landscape plan. That seems like the nexus to me. I just basically, so I don't know how you would handle this, whether this is an administrative decision, an added requirement, or it has to be in the condition of approval. But basically, it starts off, prior to recordation, the applicant shall revise the landscape plan to include additional vegetation and plantings along the southern slope areas of the subject site above Ascension Drive, etc. Just add and Bel Air Road is all. So the same requirement that was added, the details in the rest of that paragraph for Ascension would also apply to Bel Air. So whether that needs to be an amendment of that condition or some other method that you require that's what we're getting at, I think.
Yes, I think what I'd recommend is that we attach that as a condition of approval to the grading schedule, and it would just be a condition that cross-references the condition you just mentioned and clarifies that it also applies to Bel Air.
That sounds good, thanks.
Sure.
Anybody else? Okay. Go ahead. Go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I think having heard the neighbor concern and your opinion, Steve, I think personally I would have no problem recommending the approval with maybe about 5 conditions. And in my gathering of information, it would be maybe additional flagments and the areas of a blind spot brought up to the attention of, I think, Alice. And then maybe clearly marked nearby trees to adherence of guidelines. Then tarping truck in and out of the construction area. And then notice maybe or posting of information who to contact regarding any violations. And then the last but not least is Commission and Ketchum proposal to add the additional street on agreed upon change that we have done in the past.
That's tracking consistent with the conditions of approval that we've indicated agreement with. The one thing that we haven't talked about yet is the issue that you bring up about demarking trees. As we heard from the applicant's engineers, the limits of work will be staked and marked. And my recommendation to the commission would be that the condition of approval require that the limits of work not only be staked, but also be fenced where feasible using temporary fencing. Now, there might be some areas where it's not feasible because the grading is going to change and the fence would be in the way, but I think in most instances, the temporary fencing showing the limits of work would be appropriate and would achieve the objective you seek of making sure that no additional trees that shouldn't be removed are damaged.
Okay, thank you, Steve.
I'm thinking that what would be the frequency of the county monitoring besides the normal inspections? It seems to me that the county, different departments should be involved in a more frequent basis to make sure that everything is going according to plan. Is that something that we can also add to that?
Typically, we establish conditions that apply to applicants, not to our own staff. But I agree